All right, let's talk about something that affects pretty much all of us, our data. Specifically, who gets to see it when it's stored on the other side of the planet. Today, we're breaking down a huge piece of legislation called the Cloud Act, and we're going to use a fantastic, nonpartisan report from the Congressional Research Service as our guide to really understand what's going on.
So let's just imagine this for a second. Your email provider, maybe it's Google or Microsoft, stores your data on a server in, say, Ireland. But law enforcement back in Ohio needs to see those emails for an investigation. Who wins? For a long time, the answer was, well, it was a mess. But a 2018 law tried to clear all that up.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the world before the Cloud Act to see why we even needed it. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the act itself, how it works for the US and for other countries. Of course, we have to cover the big debate it kicked off, and we'll finish up with the ultimate check and balance built right into the law. Okay, first things first. To really get why the Cloud Act even exists, you have to understand the problem it was trying to solve. And it's a problem born from a world where our data is literally everywhere and nowhere at the same time. This right here, this sums it all up perfectly. You've got technology moving at the speed of light, instant, global, seamless. But the legal system for getting that data across borders, it was stuck in the past, relying on these things called Mutual Legal Assistance Treaties, or MLATs. Think of it like trying to catch a race car with a horse and buggy. It was slow, clunky, and just not built for the internet age. So something had to give, right? In 2018, Congress steps in and passes this law to try and bridge that massive gap. It's officially called the Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act, but everyone just calls it the Cloud Act. And boy, did it change the rules of the game. Now, as that Congressional Research Service report breaks it down for us, the Cloud Act really does two main things. You can think of it as a two-part solution. Part one is all about how the U.S. gets data from anywhere in the world, and part two is about how foreign governments can get data from here in the U.S. So let's dig into that first piece. How did this law change the game for U.S. law enforcement when the data they need isn't actually, in the U.S.? Well, it all came to a head with this massive legal fight. The U.S. government, using a law from way back in 1986, told Microsoft to hand over some emails. The only problem, those emails were physically stored on a server in Dublin, Ireland. Microsoft said no, and this thing blew up into a huge court battle that was headed straight for the Supreme Court. But before the court could even rule, Congress passed the Cloud Act, which basically just ended the whole debate. And this is the absolute game changer. The Cloud Act introduced a whole new standard. It's not about where the server is anymore. The only question that matters now is this. Does a U.S. company have possession, custody, or control of the data? If the answer is yes, they have to hand it over. Geography just became irrelevant. It's all about control. But remember, I said it was a two-part solution. The Cloud Act isn't just a one-way street. It also created a brand new, much faster way for other countries to get data from U.S. companies. It's the other side of the bargain. So here's how it works. The U.S. can now create these special agreements with other countries. And if a country has one of these agreements, their law enforcement can go directly to, say, Google or Apple to get data for investigations into serious crimes. It lets them completely skip that old, slow treaty process we talked about earlier. But, and this is a really big but, it's not a free-for-all. Before any of these agreements can happen, the U.S. Attorney General has to stand up and certify to Congress that the other country meets some really high standards. They have to have strong privacy laws, they have to promise not to target Americans, and they have to follow a bunch of other important rules. So, as you can probably imagine, a law this sweeping kicked off a huge debate. It really boils down to this classic conflict, the need to fight crime efficiently versus the need to protect individual privacy and human rights. Okay, so on one side, you have the supporters. And as the CRS report pointed out, this includes major tech companies. Their argument is pretty straightforward. This is just a practical modern fix for a modern problem. It helps law enforcement do their job, and it gives tech companies a clear rulebook so they're not stuck in the middle of international legal battles. But on the other side of the coin, you have civil liberties groups and privacy advocates ringing some serious alarm bells. They worry that this gives way too much power to the executive branch to decide who our partners are without any review from a judge. And they make a really powerful point. A country can have great laws on paper, but that doesn't always match how they actually treat their citizens in the real world. So with all that power in the hands of the executive branch to make these deals, you might be asking yourself, is there a safety valve? Is there some kind of final check on this whole process? Well, yes. Yes, there is. 180. That's the number to remember. 180 days. That is how long Congress gets to review, debate, and potentially stop any new data sharing agreement before it can ever go into effect. And this isn't just them passively watching. During that 180-day window, if Congress doesn't like the deal, they can actively vote to kill it. They can pass what's called a joint resolution of disapproval, and that stops the agreement dead in its tracks. It's a powerful tool that makes sure our elected representatives get the final say.
At the end of the day, as the Congressional Research Service puts it, this law is a really big deal. It's one of the most significant changes we've seen in decades to how the U.S. handles this delicate dance between fighting crime and protecting data in a world that doesn't really have borders anymore.
And that really leaves us with the billion-dollar question that this law tries to answer, doesn't it? In a world where our data can be anywhere in an instant, how do we draw that line? Where does security end and privacy begin? It's a question we're all going to be grappling with for a long, long time.